PHP Login. The objectives of this video is to create a simple login program using PHP, Ajax, JQuery, and MySQL, and also introduce PHP Session. The contents of this video is first setting up the database table that will contain the username and password. And then I'll be explaining the user interface to be used by this program or this application or the login program. And then the JQuery module that will interact with the server-side script to check for the user credentials or the login credentials. And then server-side script to check the login credentials. And then of course explain the PHP session. Setting up the database table. So here we're going to create a table that will contain the username and the password. The typical fields are the ID, which will serve as a primary key or automatic numbering field, the username and the password. You can also add other fields like level of access to signify roles, or that will more or less contain the roles of users. Now I'm going to show you here that I've created a table in the database and I call it users. And these are the fields. We have ID, username, and password. So the ID is an integer or an auto increment integer. And then we have username and password. And then of course ID is our primary key. And I already inserted tables or records. I already populated this table. So let's take a look at the contents of this. Okay, so for simplicity, I only use a username, user, and password, and then the other one is admin. Of course, these are not so secure username and passwords. So I have now set up the database table. So the next will be the user interface. The user interface includes at least two input tags, one for the username and another for the password. The type of these input tags are text and password respectively. Of course, per password, we're going to use a type password to conceal the text or the numbers or the digits we have used in our password. And then we have at least one button to activate the login event. So we're going to place a button for that one. And then we're going to include also the necessary CSS codes. And one of the code for one of our CSS code is for to make our program more responsive to the device we're going to use. So here's my login form. Wait. And here is the code for my login. So I have here a container. It's inside the card. And what's more important here is that I have two inputs here. Actually three, but the other one is a button. So the first one is of type text with the name, username, and ID username. Then another one is of type password with the name, password, and ID is password. And then I have one button with an ID, btn, login. Now if we're going to open our program, login.php. So this will be the output of the program. So as you can see, I have here two text box and one login button. Okay, so that will be for the user interface. Now for the JQuery module. So in our main program also, we have a JQuery module, and it contains a script to handle the login event. for the login program, and then the script may contain the following: validating the completeness of the login credentials, executing the server-side script of checking the login credentials, that is through Ajax, and then doing the necessary action if the login attempt is successful or not. Now, so here's our program. It's actually with the file name login PHP. We have executed this a while ago. Now let's check our jQuery code. So this is our jQuery code. You notice here I have here the click event for the button login. So this is what will be executed once we click on the button login. First is we try to get the value of the username input and then the password name input. So we both store them in the variables username and pw. Now if one of them is blank, so if username is equal to blank or pw is equal to blank, then that means we don't have a complete login information. So we just show an alert box saying that our login information is incomplete, and then we exit, so return false. However, if it is complete, then what we do is through Ajax, we open the check login PHP, and we also pass the value of username and password here. So we have your username and password. So it will be passed in this script using the get method. Then, so after executing this will test now for the success of the check login. So we have here the result. If the result is equal to 1, then we change the window location, or we jump or we move to another program that is the main PHP. However, if the login is not successful, that means result is not equal to 1, then we show an alert showing that the login is invalid. So that will be our jQuery. Now let's first check this one. So it says here that if our username or password is incomplete, it will show us the login. It will show an alert box rather. So here's our program a while ago. So let's say I will not type anything. I just press on login button. It will say here that I have an incomplete login information. If I just type the username, again it will say here that I have an incomplete login information. So the same is true if I just type password, then I have an incomplete login information. So in our jQuery, it will execute a backend script. So I think the file name I use there is checklogin.php. So that is our backend script. So the backend script will contain the following. Number one is to connect to the database and then get the user inputs, execute a query to check if password and username combination exist, and return an indicator to signal success or failure of the login. So let us now check the code. So here is my check login. So I have here session start, because I'm going to use session variables, which I will be explaining more on the next slide. And then error reporting 0 here. So first that our backend script contains is connecting to the database. So here I connected to the database by specifying the host, the username, and the password, and of course the database name. And then this creates an object, or creates my connection object. Then the second one is to get the username and password that was passed by my Ajax. So using the get method. So I have to get username and get password. And then the third step is to execute the query to check if I have the correct combination of username and password. So I have here select ID from users, where username is equal to question mark and password is equal to question mark. So question mark are our parameters. So what are we going to do with this? We now prepare this. So this is a prepared statement. So again, prepared statement are quite better because it can minimize the risk of SQL injection. And then here we bind the parameters. So both question marks are our parameters, so both are string. So we have here SS, and the value will be coming from the username and the password. Then we execute the query or the SQL command, then get the result set. So we get the result set, and the next is we count how many rows are there in our result set by making use of this function. So MySQL I num rows. Now if the row count is greater than 0, then that means that we were able to retrieve a record with this combination of username and password. So that means that we were able to get a combination, and that's a successful login. So we get the username and store it in a session variable. And then we echo 1 because this will be our indicator that the login was successful. However, if row count is not greater than 0, that means it is equal to 0, or maybe lesser, but of course it will be equal to 0. So we just unset the username so that if it contains any value, the value will be just erased, and then I just echo 0. So 1 is for successful login and 0 for unsuccessful login, and then I just close the connection. So if we're going to look again at our jQuery code a while ago, so we check login, and then the output of that program, the check login PHP, will be placed here at rest. So if res is equal to 1, then that means it is successful. If it is not equal to 1, then that means it is invalid. And then lastly, I have here the PHP Session. When you work with an application, you open it, do some changes, and then you close it. This is much like a session. The computer knows who you are. It knows when you start the application and when you end. But on the internet, there is one problem. The web server does not know who you are or what you do because the HTTP address doesn't maintain state. Session variables solve this problem by storing user information to be used across multiple pages. So examples of these are username, favorite color, etc. By default, session variables last until the user closes the browser. So session variables hold information about one single user and are available to all pages in one application. So in PHP, to do this, we have to start a session. So to start a PHP session. And a session is started with a session start function. And then session variables are set with a PHP global variable, so $_session. So we use that to set and also to get values from the session variable. So again, if we're going to take a look at our login, so to start the session, we use a session start, and then we use this variable to set. So we're setting this variable to the value of the username that was entered by the user if the login was successful. However, unset here means we're erasing or we are not setting this. So that means this becomes undefined. This session variable becomes undefined if we unset. And again, if we're going to look back at our login program, it says here that once the login is successful, it will open main PHP. So main PHP here will contain the following. So whatever code below here does not really matter now. What is important is here. So it will again start the session. So you have to place this in every page so that you can be able to achieve or retrieve session variables. So here we start the session, and then we get the value of the username. If the username is not yet set, so if it is set rather, then we get the value of the username. If not, then we have a blank string. So if the session username is blank string, that means that the session username the session username rather is not set yet. So that means the user maybe haven't logged in yet. So if that's the case, then we go back to the login screen. So you have to force the user to log in if the session username is not yet set. So let us now try the program. So let's say, for example, again, if I place an invalid username and invalid password, displays, no wait, okay, so let us now test the program. So if I use an invalid name and invalid password, so both of these combination does not exist in my table. So if I click on login, it says here that I have invalid login credentials. Now if you still remember, I have the following combination of username and password, user and password, and admin. So let's try admin. So what if I place here admin, then admin. So once I click login, it was now able to open my main PHP. So that is now my example of a login program. So thank you for watching this video.